Welcome everyone to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress Meetup Group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host. West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group and is affiliated with the main WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups. Full site editing, or FSE, was introduced with WordPress 5.9 in January 2022, and additional enhancements will be soon coming out with version 6.0. FSE signifies a major shift in the way that we build websites with WordPress. Despite all the hype and discussion around FSE, you might still be wondering, what is it, how does it work, and what does it mean for my site or the sites of my clients? In this presentation, Nick Diego will provide a thorough overview of FSE and discuss how you can leverage these changes to build better websites. FSE is the future of modern theming in WordPress core, and we could not be more excited. Nick Diego is a developer advocate at WP Engine and has been working with WordPress for over a decade. Passionate about the Gutenberg project and modern WordPress web development, he splits his time between creating educational content, building experimental plugins and themes, and contributing to WordPress core. You can follow him on Twitter at NickMDiego, or reach out to the in the WordPress Slack channel at @NDiego. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. Nick, thank you so much for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to talk about full site editing today and provide a pretty thorough introduction. And what I want to start with is just a bit about me. Thank you, Rob, for providing that introduction. We can breeze through this pretty quickly. I do work for WP Engine, and I'm a developer advocate, which means I am working with all kind of the newest things that are coming to WordPress, and then reaching out to the community in meetups like this or through other educational content to kind of teach people about how these new tools, what these new tools are and how to use them. So I'm very excited to be talking to you all tonight. I'm blushing here, but I'm also part of the WordPress 6.0 release team, and 6.0, if you didn't know already, is coming out next Tuesday, which I'm very excited about. So a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about tonight, whether it's full site editing, new features, a lot of those will actually be in core starting next week. So let's get started. So what is full site editing? You may have heard the term, and a lot of times people think it's a singular feature. Well, it's actually a collection of features. It's actually like an umbrella. And it includes, basically what it does is it's taking the familiar experience of blocks and it's applying those to all parts of your website, rather than just posts and pages. So we're talking about headers, footers, sidebars, everything. And underneath the umbrella of full site editing, we have things like the site editor, which I'll show you tonight, global styles, different blocks, query blocks, navigation blocks, templates, and even block themes. So the key takeaway here is it's not a singular feature, it's a bunch of features, and full site editing is being actively developed. We're not done yet. There's still a lot of work to do. Again, it was introduced in 5.9 back in January, but this is something that's going to be worked on for, many, many editions of WordPress, probably likely years. So as we go through our discussion of full site editing tonight, I wanted to start with the basics, make sure we're kind of all on the same page in terms of terminology, then talk about what the anatomy of a block theme is, because it's very different from maybe a classic traditional theme. We'll get a little bit technical and talk about global settings and styles, or the theme.json file. Even if this is a little bit technical, I think it's important to kind of introduce everybody to what this file is and what global settings and styles are, because they kind of present a fundamental core of what full site editing is. We'll do a live action demo, and just so you can see everything in action. I think it really sells it when you can see full site editing in action. And then I'll talk about my thoughts about modern theming. So let's start with the basics. So the most basic of everything is a block. So a block is the fundamental unit of content in WordPress. So ever since the block editor was introduced back in 5.0 in 2018 now, when you go into the WordPress editor, unless you're using the classic editor, which is a rich text editor, you will be presented with a block editor where all your content is presented in blocks. You have paragraph blocks and so on and so forth. So we can see here all the different blocks that are available, a selection of the blocks that are available in WordPress. We have paragraphs and headings and images and columns, all sorts of different content. And these are just the core blocks. So of course, there's third-party block libraries that you can install as plugins that add more functionality. But the main idea here is that every piece of content on your website is a block. So in 5.9, which came out in January, with the introduction of full site editing, we saw the introduction of what are called theme blocks. So this is content that you traditionally could never directly edit inside of core WordPress. Things like navigation. Now, of course, you could edit on the navigation screen, but you couldn't edit navigation visually. Site logo, site title, post title. You could edit these things in many different ways, through settings or through the customizer, but never before could you edit them directly as content elements. So what 5.9 has introduced is all these different pieces of content, things like post categories and post tags and log in and out buttons, things like that, that traditionally would be presented in code or short codes. They're now all blocks, which gives us a much more rich full site editing experience, because now you can edit these pieces of content in WordPress you never could before without there are page builders and other extenders that would allow you to edit them, but not within WordPress core. So next we need to talk about patterns. Patterns are very simply, a pattern is just a predefined collection of blocks that forms a specific layout. And patterns are very important for full site editing because they allow you to insert a bunch of predefined blocks to define a layout. So let me explain what that means. And a pattern could be a single block or made up of multiple. So here we have a piece of content. It's just a heading, it has a little bit of text and some buttons, right? Now, this design is made up of many blocks. It's made up of a heading block, it's made up of a paragraph block, and then buttons. But if you present this as a pattern where a user, instead of having to add the heading, add the paragraph, add the buttons, with a single click, they can insert this layout, then they can just go in and change the title, change the text. So it really speeds up the laying out a web page when you can use patterns. And patterns are very useful for theme authors because you can design a theme, provide it to a client, sell your theme, and include a whole bunch of different patterns that are designed to work with your theme aesthetic. And now you've provided users with a one-click method to insert these designs into their web pages. So with 5.9 was the introduction of the Pattern Explorer. So this takes patterns and makes them more visual and more, surfaces them more inside of the block editor. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing patterns from the 2022 theme. So this theme was introduced in 5.9. It's the first block theme, a theme that's made entirely of blocks, which is you need to be using a block theme to work with full site editing. And it showcases, it's called a hatchery theme, so you're going to see birds everywhere. But it showcases full site editing in 5.9 and all the functionality that comes with it. So with it, they provided a whole bunch of patterns, and you can see those here. So we have, a list of events, 2 images with text, and all these designs can be inserted with a single click. Next, we need to talk about the editor, because this is something that if you've been in WordPress for a while, you've heard about the editor as it could be called Gutenberg, it could be called the block editor, it could be called the Gutenberg editor. There's all these different names for the WordPress editor. And so for the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to call it the editor. It seems a little silly to call that out, but because there have been so many names for it in the past, I just wanted to be clear about that. So the editor is the interface that we use to edit and create posts and pages out of blocks. The distinction is necessary because we also have the classic editor, which is where content is, you lay out your content in a rich text editor. So the editor's been around for a while, ever since 5.8. And introduced in 5.9, I missed a slide. So this is the editor. This is the editor where you can edit all your content with blocks. And then you can insert your blocks using the inserter here. The slide I was hoping to get to is the site editor. So the site editor was introduced in 5.9. The site editor is a cohesive experience that allows you to directly edit and navigate between various templates, template parts, styling options, and more. So basically, whereas the standard editor allows you to edit your posts and pages, the site editor allows you to edit everything else. From headers and footers to different templates, everything else on your website, you can edit within the site editor. So if you're using the block theme like 2022, then when you activate that theme, you'll get access to the site editor. And it's in two places. It's under Appearance, and then it's in the top nav. So you'll notice here that it still says beta on the right here. It says beta. Full site editing is in beta. It is going to be in beta for some time. That doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't begin exploring it and playing around with it. But no, the beta tag means that there's a lot more yet to be built. Not that it's not stable or anything like that. It's just that there's still a lot left to do. Still a lot more work to be done. So this is the site editor, and we'll see this live in a bit. Looks very similar to the standard editor. But you'll notice at the top, there's this little home button, and it's allowing you to select between headers and footers, which is kind of different. If we open up this, the list view on the side, and you look through the list view, you can notice that we have headers and we have our footer, but we also have the query loop. So if you're familiar with WordPress theming, you know that templates are built out, and you have the WordPress loop, which loops through all your posts and displays all your posts. Well, instead of that being in code, it's now all in block form. And because it's in block form, you can edit it, change it, move things around all visually without the need to write any code. And you'll notice here some of those theme blocks that I talked about earlier. We have that post title, the post featured image, post excerpt, and post date. Because these are all blocks, similar to the block editor, you can move them around, you can configure the various settings that are applied to them, all visually without any code. Now, within the site editor, you can also edit more parts of your site. So if you click on the little W icon, you'll get access to your templates. So the templates, traditionally in WordPress, you could never edit your templates. You needed to do that in code. But now all the templates that are part of your theme, in this case, the 2022 theme, they're all surfaced now in the site editor, which means that you can go into each one of them and edit them to your heart's content. We also have template parts, and template parts, again, have existed in WordPress, but they were all PHP files, and now they're all being surfaced inside of this interface. Here in the 2022 theme, we have headers and footers. Now this little dot here, the little blue icon, a little blue dot, is indicating that this header template has been edited by the user. One of the interesting things about the site editor is even though these files are being pulled from your theme, any changes that you make are stored in the database. So, which is really handy because you always can revert those changes and go back to whatever your theme provided. And one of the things that, it provides a lot of power because instead of writing the changes directly to the theme files, you've now stored them locally in your website, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a way to export that content, which is a very powerful, some very powerful functionality. So now when you go in to edit that template part, for example, I clicked into that header. Now you can see that we have a site logo and we have a site title and a navigation block. These are all blocks. So you can go in and change them as you'd like. So now let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a block theme, because block themes are different in many ways than a traditional WordPress theme. So a block theme, like 2022, is one that fully embraces full site editing. Theme templates are composed entirely of blocks. Templates and template parts are HTML rather than PHP files. And each block theme can minimally consist of a style.css file, an index.html file, and an index.php file. Now, I put an asterisk here because an index.php file is a remnant from traditional themes that are all built in PHP. So in the future, that probably won't be needed. And then most block themes include a theme.json file. And we'll talk about that in a second. So this is a visual look of the file structure for the 2022 theme that we were just looking at. And you'll notice here are the required files. But you'll also notice here that we have two folders, one for templates and one for template parts. So all those templates and template parts that we saw in the user interface, these are the files in the theme itself. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to focus specifically on the 404 template, because you could never usually edit your 404 page on a website unless you were using, third-party, unless your theme, you're using a page builder or a third-party plugin or something like that. Editing the 404 page was not easily done. You usually need to edit in code. But what we're going to do now is we're going to head back into the site editor. We're going to find the 404 page because it's a template file in our theme, so it comes into the user interface. Then we're going to click into it. And this is very similar to the block editor. It is blocks in the site editor, and we can edit them just like any other block. But before we do, let's take a look at what the file actually is made up of. So this is exactly what's in the file. So if you went to go download the 2022 theme, crack open the 404.html file, this is what you'd find. It's not PHP, it's all HTML. And what it is, it's specifying different blocks. It's just a different markup language for blocks. So at the top here, you can see it says a template part, and the bottom it says a template part, and the top says header, and the bottom says footer. What this is doing is it's pulling in the template part for the header, template part for the footer. Those footer and header template parts are going back to our theme file structure, are stored in the parts folder. You can see those here highlighted in teal. Now, as we move further in, we have a group, and this is a group block. Then we have another group block. This is just for layout settings, and we'll see this in the live demo. And then finally, we have a pattern block, and this pattern is pulling in the hidden -404 pattern. So as we saw earlier, where a pattern is just a collection of blocks, the theme author for 2022 defined a pattern, which was a collection of blocks that was the design for the 404 page. And here, all we're doing is we're pulling in that pattern, which is just, again, a collection of blocks. So when we go back to the site editor, we can see that the top part is our header template part, and then the content in the middle is that 404 pattern that the theme author designed. But again, these are just blocks. Just because the template file is pulling in various things, in the site editor, we just have blocks. So if we wanted to start editing these blocks, we could. We could give it a bold heading, we could change the color, anything we want. Anything that you would normally do to blocks, you can do to the 404 page. And then when you're done, you just click save, and you'll notice in this side over here, it's saying that we're saving the 404 template. And again, this save will be saved to the database. And on the front end, you'll get those changes. And if you ever wanted to revert back, you could revert back to what's in the theme. Now, you can also add new template parts or new templates right within the UI. So if you click Add New, you can click here and you can add a new template part. So if you wanted to add a new header, a new footer, a new sidebar, all done within the user interface. So while this takes a lot to learn and get used to, the neat thing is we haven't touched any code. And we've edited our 404 template. We're about to add a new template part, all done without touching any code. Now, one of the greatest things, and I'll show you this live, is that with those changes made, we can now export this theme. And what this will do is it will take all our changes made in the database, and it will write them to the files that are in the theme. And it will spit that out as a completely full-fledged theme with all of our edits made. And this is really cool because you could take, say, the 2022 theme, come in here, make tons of changes, change color palettes, change everything, click export, and you get a brand new theme that has the base 2022 theme, and then all your changes automatically applied to it, which I think is going to be a really powerful thing in the future and allow for people who are, no code, low code theme designers to take a base theme, make huge amounts of customizations, and just click export, and they have a brand new theme. So the next piece I want to talk about is theme.json. So this is a bit complicated, but it's very important to kind of understanding how this kind of all works under the hood. So this is a file that lives in the theme directory for the 2022 theme. And pretty much every block theme has the theme.json file. It's a very simple file, and it includes mainly three things aside from a version number. It includes custom templates and custom template parts. This is where you would just register custom templates and template parts. We're not going to dive into that too much here. But the other piece is the settings and the style. So let's talk about the settings first. Settings are what determine what settings are available inside of the block and site editors. So you'll see here we says border and color and layout and spacing. These are settings that define, do you want to allow users to edit the border? Do you want to set a certain custom color palette? Do you want to define the layout? Do you want to define certain spacing characteristics? Do you want to define the fonts that are used on your theme? This is where you would specify all of that. Now, in a traditional theme, sometimes this would be done in PHP. Sometimes you'd have a massive style sheet that handles all of this. This is just a single JSON file where you're specifying color palettes and the different fonts that you want to use. And it takes a lot to get used to, but once you're familiar with it, it makes specifying how a theme should look and feel massively easier than before. So you can also specify things at the block level. This is kind of neat because you could have a color palette for your website, but then for paragraphs or buttons, maybe you want to have a different color palette or maybe a smaller color palette. Maybe you want buttons to only be 2 colors, even though your site has a larger color palette. This is where you can define that at the block level. So settings can be very powerful. So here we see the settings for color. And at the global level, I've specified a color palette, which is black, white, and I think green. And in the editor, when a user goes to change color, you will see that color palette in the color picker. Those are the colors that you see there. Now, this other piece, complementary to settings, is the styles section. The style section is very similar to CSS. So one of the neat things you'll find is if you open up the 2022 theme and you look at the style.css file, it's very short. There's not a lot of CSS in the theme at all. The reason for that is because it's being handled predominantly by theme.json with the styles that are applied at the block level. So again, we have borders and colors and filters and spacing. And then at the block level, you can specify borders, colors, spacing, typography. So this allows you to specify, say, the font that all your paragraph blocks should use, the color for all your paragraphs, so on and so forth. And again, you have that global and that block level broken down. So again, I know this looks like a mess, but one of the interesting things is that in the settings where I set that color palette, when those colors are set, they basically create variables that you can then use throughout your theme. So for example, we defined colors for like foreground and background and primary and so on and so forth. And you can see that here. We have our button and it's green. And the reason it's green is because I've set the background to be the primary color and I set primary to be green in the settings. And the background color is white. And that's why you see here that we've defined text for the button as background, which is white. So this takes a lot to get used to. But basically what we're doing is instead of defining all this in a style sheet, defining all of the styles for buttons and whatnot, I can specify this once here. And the beauty of this is that the reason that theme.json is important is because even though I've specified green and background and all that kind of thing, this doesn't preclude the user from then going in and changing the buttons inside the interface. Because what we want to allow is this is full site editing. We want people to be able to edit things if they so choose. And even though these are defaults, you can still edit them inside of the editor. So one of the problems with relying on CSS is because CSS will a lot of times override what's in the editor. So if you were to specify all the button color by CSS, you wouldn't be able to change the color inside the editor because the controls wouldn't work because they're getting overridden by CSS. That's kind of the inspiration behind theme.json. We're setting defaults for all of our blocks, and we're setting additional settings that define how the interface works. And you can see that here at the global level, we've also specified color for the background and color for the foreground for the website entirely. And the reason I bring that up let me go back and dwell on that. So right now at the global level, the background is the color background and the text is the color foreground. You may not remember this, but the foreground is black and the background color is white. And when we look at our site here, we can see that aside from this header part, the background of the site is white and the text is black. But one of the cool things you can do now in the global styles panel inside the site editor is I can open it up. I can go to colors. I can see that my background is white and my text is black. I can click on background, open that up, and I can see that the current color is white. Again, that's because it was set in theme.json. But then with a single click, I can make it peach. All with a single click, change the background for the entire. And it specifies the settings that are available in the editor. And the great thing about it is that while setting the defaults, it still allows the user to change things inside of the editor. Okay, so at this point, I want to do a really quick live demo because I think to kind of bring it all back together, we should see this live. So what I'm going to do here is I have a local website that's running the 2022 theme. And what I want to do here is I'm going to just, hopefully this will take about 3 minutes, and I'm going to show you how powerful this all can be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start, so we're on our homepage now. And again, this is the hatchery theme, a lot of birds. We're going to click into a post. In my post here, you can see the post that I have here. I'm going to edit the post. In my post, I want to employ one of the patterns that the theme author provided. So I'm going to click on the inserter. I'm going to go to patterns. And I'm going to take a look at the pattern explorer. And so the 2022 theme comes with a whole bunch of patterns. I want to use, I believe it is, I want to use this hummingbird, I think it's a hummingbird, image. So I'm going to click the pattern. Again, this is just a bunch of blocks. And I'm going to click it, and it's going to insert it into the editor. If I click on the list view, I can see all the blocks that this pattern is made up of. It's basically a group with a median text block and then 2 paragraphs. Because it's a block, I can edit it. So I don't really want it to be so wide, so I'm going to set it to none. So now we have our little hummingbird card. I'm going to update this, and I'm going to preview it. So here's our post again, and now we have our hummingbird image. So that's all well and good. That's something that you could have done prior to 5.9 and full site editing. But now I have the 2022 theme, and I really don't love this. I really don't love the heading on this post. I wish that the post template was different and had a different heading. So with the beauty of full site editing, I can change that. So I'm going to click on the edit site. This is going to take me to the site editor. And by default, it's going to take me to the home page. So we want to edit the post template. So I'm going to go over to templates, and I'm going to go to single post. And this is what that post looks like. It's abstracted because we don't have a post title or a featured image. But if we come back here, of course, that did that. So if we open this preview window here, we can see that we have a post title, featured image, post title, featured image. So now I want to change that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a cover block. Now, one of the cool things that's being introduced in 6.0, again, next week, is the ability to pull the featured image into the cover block. So I'm going to click here and say use featured image, set the background to black. Now, again, we don't see our featured image in the site editor because this is just a template. I don't have a featured image yet. But inside of my cover block, I'm going to add the post title. So again, this is a block. I can change background, color, typography, everything, but I'm going to keep it simple, make it centered. Then I'm going to add a post date. Here we go. Again, it's another block. Here I'm just centering it. Now, this is a bit of a trick, not a trick, but just something that you do a lot when building out block themes is we're going to group these together. Once grouped, I can then control the spacing between them. I'm going to set this to 10 pixels, a little bit tighter. Then I'm going to give this some nice height. How about 600 pixels? So now I have this kind of interesting cover that's supposed to be pulling in the featured image. But what I don't need now is I don't need all of this. I don't need this additional post title and content. I'm going to use my list view again just to make things easy. Scroll down, and I see that this group here kind of contains all of this content that I don't want. So I'm going to remove that. So now I have a header, I have my cover and a group. This header, this is a nitpicking here, but this header is a little bit too far away from this new post title that I created. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the row, and you can see here that's at 100 pixels. I want to change this down to 20 now. Now that's a little bit tighter. So now I'm good to go. I'm going to click save. And I'm going to go like this. So now, again, this is what it looks like now. And I'm going to refresh this page. And now we have an interesting cover image that pulls in the featured image. And then we have our title and our post date. So we've edited our full website through the site editor all in about a minute. Now, there's one other thing that I want to show you, and that's, I find this quite delightful, for lack of a better word. When we go back to the homepage, we showed you a little bit how, okay, I didn't mean to do that. We showed you a little bit how you can change the background color, and I can do that live here just to show you how that works. If I click on the global styles, I can again go to colors, background, and I can change it to that peach color. However, one of the cool things that's coming in 6.0 next week is this concept of styles. So styles are basically a way for a theme author to provide multiple different versions kind of the theme for the end user. And so 2022 is going to include this next week. It will include these 4 different options to choose from. Now watch as I click one of these. A lot has changed. Not only has the color palette changed, the fonts have also changed. And again, those are those fonts defined in that theme.json file. So now we have completely different fonts. And now if I click save, and I come back to my sample post and I refresh, now I have a completely different look and feel, different fonts, different colors. And if I go to my homepage, we have that red homepage. So all with a few clicks and a few, messing around, we've completely changed the website. We completely changed the whole thing, all within the site editor. And that's just a little taste. I'll leave the demo there, but that's just a little taste of how powerful the site editor can be. I do want to caveat, though, still a lot left to do within the site editor. So let me hop back here real quick, and we'll just close out with some thoughts on the future of modern theming. So what you saw there with a lot of like design and changing of things, changing that header image and adding patterns, I strongly believe that modern theming moving forward will emphasize design over development. Not that development won't exist. I just think that it's going to empower people who don't know PHP, don't have a very strong technical coding backgrounds. It's going to empower them to go in there and design however they like, and rather than having to learn how do I move the post title around in code. It's like, no, you just go in and move it with a little toggle. So I think that that's going to be very exciting for people who may not be, maybe aren't in the WordPress space, but now with this tool will be able to come in and design their websites themselves. As we saw today, the editor will play a major role in how we design themes. A lot of times in the past, and I've done this myself, maybe you put together a design and whether it's Sketch or Photoshop or whatever for your website design, and then you'd code it up. You code up everything, and then you'd iterate and iterate and iterate. That doesn't happen anymore, at least with full site editing themes. You go in, you design everything in blocks, all visually. And then when you're done, you could just export it and pull that content and put it into theme files. So a lot of the way that themes are designed, I believe, will start in the editor. And then once you're happy with the design and the layout and everything, then you go into the theme files. It's a lot more fun, believe me. And I think that because of this, low code or no code theme development will exist. And this greater accessibility will usher in new generations of users. One of the things that brought me to WordPress was how open and accessible it was. And there's an argument to say that a lot of this new way of doing things in WordPress is actually making it harder for people to, work in WordPress. A lot of custom blocks, they're written in JavaScript and React. The whole entire editor is written in JavaScript and React. So to be a WordPress developer requires more technical skills. But that doesn't mean that using WordPress requires more technical skills. It actually, I think, is going to reduce the barrier to entry massively for people actually using WordPress. One of the things that I've found, and I do a lot of training sessions with folks, is that people who have used WordPress before have a hard time with the site editor because we're so used to doing things as we've done before. People who've never used WordPress before actually take to it a lot quicker because they don't have any of those preconceptions about how things should work. They just start moving things around with blocks and design how they like. And I do think that now is the time to begin exploring full site editing. One of the things that I really shy away from is when people say that, oh, full site editing, block theming, classic themes are dead. No. Traditional WordPress theming will be around for an incredibly long time, if forever. Similarly, if you use a page builder, keep using, and you like it, keep using it. My only hope is that as we progress in WordPress and as we make full site editing better and better and better, you'll just be encouraged to explore it. Exploring how it works, understanding the concepts behind it, using the block editor to its fullest capabilities, I think will, even if you don't end up using it yourself, maybe you're using Elementor, maybe you're using Divi or whatever it might be, knowing how WordPress core is moving and some of these tools that are being built, I think is a very valuable tool. And honestly, it's quite fun once you get used to it. So I want to end by saying, if you like what you're using to build your WordPress website, keep using it. That stuff's not going away. But I also encourage you to give it a try. Download the 2022 theme, especially when 6.0 comes out next week. It's a lot more refined, honestly. So I think it's very exciting. I think we have a bright future ahead of us for WordPress. But full site editing is a paradigm shift, and it's going to take some getting used to. And I really encourage you to give it a try. So thank you for attending. If you want to learn, so one of the things I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about full site editing, there's a couple of great resources. The first is learn.wordpress.org. So I'm a contributing member of the training team, where we do a lot of training and training resources similar to these meetups. So if you want to learn more about all things full site editing and kind of modern WordPress, it's a great resource. There's courses, all sorts of stuff. The block editor handbook's another great one. It's a little bit heady, but all the information around what's going on with and how to do different things in WordPress is a great one. And then again, the 2022 theme, great place to start with block theming. So thank you so much. Again, I'm on Twitter. You have my website there. If you ever have a question about full site editing, hit me up. I'm a developer advocate. This is kind of what my job is. And I just want to make sure that everybody in WordPress feels comfortable with full site editing, feel comfortable engaging with it, even if they want to use it or not. So thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. This is a really great presentation. I learned a ton. I'm just getting into the full site editor myself. And there was some stuff in there that was a complete surprise to me that I didn't know that I could do. So I really appreciate, we all really appreciate the time that you put into this. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and then we're going to move to the Q&A session.
Great.